Welcome, everybody, to an all-new episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. We have a lot to talk about, so I'm not going to mess around too much. So much to cover on this episode. We have a recap of last week's pay-per-view for the UFC 323 out there in Vegas. We'll recap a lot of the fights that happened on it. It was a pretty stacked card. We'll also preview quickly some of the fights that's going to be happening this weekend on UFC Fight Night out there and the Apex. Last card for the UFC of 2025. Last card of the ESPN era. They could take a couple weeks off here at the end of December, take a couple weeks off at the beginning of January, and then start things up with Paramount and Paramount Plus at the end of January. So it's going to be a big, long gap here between UFC cards. Not used to that, but we have the last one coming up this weekend. We'll touch on some of the big fights there. We'll also preview fight card for PFL out on Lyon, France. It is the finals of the PFL European tournaments in two of their divisions, as well as two titles being on the line in the heavyweight division for the men and the featherweight division for the women. We're going to talk about some of the top fights on that card. We'll also recap what happened for the BKFC out there, BKFC 85, down in Hollywood, Florida, last weekend at their home away from home at the Hard Rock. A lot of great fights, loaded card there as one of the last few. They actually have one coming up this weekend. We'll touch slightly on it, and then another one coming up next weekend. But we're going to talk about what happened last weekend in those fights at BKFC 85 that we unfortunately did not get to preview on last week's show. We'll also recap the pay-per-view for the boxing world, the PBC pay-per-view on Prime last weekend. Bunch of title fights on that one. We'll talk about the top two for sure. Maybe touch on one other as well. We'll also hit on some fights that were announced for the start of 2026 in all different combat sports. We have fights for the UFC. We have fights for boxing, with the BKFC. All that we will touch on coming up later in the show as well. Make sure you follow us on all our social medias. On X, it's at Fighting Lines. On Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, it is at Fighting Lines Pod. Put out clips of the show throughout the week, as well as some of our picks as we get closer to the fights and odds change throughout the weekend. So we do all that on social medias. Make sure you check that out. And wherever you are partaking of the show, whether it is on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, make sure you subscribe so you get all new episodes once they come out. Like the show, comment on it. Just get us out there for more people to find Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano so they can be involved as well with all our combat sports talk, which we can get right into when we come back, talking about UFC 323. All right, we finish out the ESPN pay-per-view era with our last numbered card for the UFC of the year out there at the T-Mobile in Las Vegas. It was UFC 323, and there's two titles on the line, headlined, of course, by the Bantamweight title fight between Merab Dvalishvili and Petr Yan. This card was not our best betting because there was a couple upsets and a couple of results that we just really did not expect. Some good performances, but just some crazy things that happened on this card, starting with this main event. This was a rematch between these two guys, between Dvalishvili and Yan. They had fought back in March of 2023 before Dvalishvili had captured the belt. It was the fourth title defense for Dvalishvili this year. He was on a 14-fight win streak, the 34-year-old, going against his nemesis Yan, the 32-year-old Russian, who was coming in on a 3-fight win streak, the former champion of this division 5 years ago. So now could he recapture that gold? Turns out he does. We did not expect that. We thought Dvalishvili minus 500 was the guy who was going to win the fight. We thought Dvalishvili by points and minus 195 was the best pick as far as odds-wise, even though it wasn't juicy, it wasn't pretty. And it does not go that way. So the only way you're going to make money is to get Yan at plus money. And if you did that, good on you, because he gets the victory, unanimous decision, 49-46 on two judges' scorecards, 48-47 on one judge's scorecard. It was, pretty lopsided. It was not necessarily a dominating fight by Yan, as, that we saw with Merab Dvalishvili in the first fight, where it was 50-45 on all cards, but Yan had a great performance. And there were some close rounds here or there that maybe Dvalishvili could have stolen, but for the most part, it was Yan's night. I mean, he stuffed most of Merab's takedowns, which is so hard to do for everybody. We saw what he did in that last fight against Sadek, just takedown after takedown after takedown. He didn't do that against Yan. Yan actually had more takedowns than Merab had in this fight. Yan rocked him a few times with some good punches as well. There was one time he was really hurt in the middle of that fight that it could have been the end there, but he somehow survives. When he gets to this fight, the questions that everyone's asking, was it just too much for Merab to keep doing this? 4 title fights in 1 year. That's not what you see from a champion. You maybe see an up-and-coming guy coming up trying to get a bunch of quick fights, especially if they're not cutting that much weight. But for a guy who cuts weight, the way Merab does, apparently, where you hear that he basically just doesn't eat from Tuesday on, that he just really cuts himself off and kind of goes on a fast in order to cut that weight instead of doing it more gradually or the way that, more nutritionists would want him to do, it takes a toll on your body, especially as you're getting up there in your career. So did he try to do too much, too quick, too fast? It's definitely a possibility, but you still have to give so much credit to Petr Yan for his performance and what he did against a guy who has just been unbeatable throughout his run in the UFC. But now he holds that title. Does Merab get the rematch? Petr Yan seems to think that he shouldn't. Seems that he thinks he should go take some time off and kind of do other things, maybe get a fight back before he does that. I mean, I don't know how you don't give him that rematch if he's ready to go. You don't want to rush him back. You want to make sure they have full camps. You want to make sure he has time to, kind of relax, refuel, replenish, and get the best Merab Dvalishvili that we have seen. But the guy won 14 fights in a row and defended that title 4 times in a year for the UFC. He's always been there, stepping up for the UFC. There's no way they cannot give him the first shot at Petr Yan in his title defense whenever he decides he is ready. Unless he was to take, 6-7 months off. Okay, if he's not fighting till June, July of next year, yeah, you don't give him that title shot right away. You don't give him that rematch right away against Petr Yan. Maybe he fights somebody else. But no matter what happens, Merab Dvalishvili, his next fight should be for that title again. And we'll see if the UFC makes that happen. You also had a fight that did not go our way for the flyweight title with Alex Pantoja versus Joshua Van. Pantoja, the 35-year-old, was on an 8-fight winning streak, including 4 title defenses himself. Van, the 24-year-old, was on a 5-fight win streak. I like both these guys. And of course, the record was terrible for fighters over 35 in the lower weight classes in title fights. But I was going to go buck that trend. I thought that, Pantoja has shown how badass he is and that he was going to be okay with that. He might have, but we never got to see that because Van gets the win by first round TKO 26 seconds into the fight. Pantoja was minus 265 on the money line. I liked him by submission at plus 150. He doesn't even get to try any of that because he gets a freak injury that throws him right out of the fight less than half a minute in. They're mixing it up on the feet, start the fight, and then Pantoja throws a kick towards the head that gets caught on Van's shoulder. He's kind of stuck up there in limbo. Can't get it free right away, and then Van kind of shoves him a little bit to break him off. And as he goes to the mat, not in an awkward position really, just kind of turning, putting his hands down, somehow it dislocates his elbow. And you see him sitting on the ground, and all of a sudden the elbow is not facing the right way. He's just holding the arm, and Herb Dean jumps in there right away, doesn't wait to see if he can keep fighting with one arm. He just saves the fighter, which was the right thing to do. I mean, it was just such a freak injury. It was a freak, accident. The reaction he had, obviously, he didn't know what the hell was going on. He's like, wait, what? He's just holding his elbow, kind of in shock. So Herb Dean did the right thing because I know guys like Dominic Cruz were sitting out there saying, well, you should see if he could pop back in and fight. I mean, it was going to be 4.5 minutes till he got to the corner to see if he could pop something back in. He was not surviving 4.5 minutes with one arm on the ground with Joshua Van ready to pounce. That was a good job by Herb Dean. Now, again, a guy who has defended the title multiple times, a guy who has been awesome for the UFC, almost unbeatable for a long time. Does he get the title shot right away? I think in this one, just like Merab, it depends on when he is able to go. The coach for Pantoja said the UFC wants an immediate rematch, but it's going to depend on what he needs to do now, what he needs to heal. That elbow popping back into place, is it okay? Is it just normal and just needs the swelling to go down? Is a situation where there's some muscles or ligaments or tendons that got ripped or shredded or need time to recover? That's going to depend on that. But if he's ready to go soon, he should be in there against Van the first time that he defends that title. If not, if it's a delay time where he needs time to heal, then you have some interesting options there. You have Tatsuro Taira or Kyoji Horiguchi. They could be in the mix because, of course, Taira had a great win in his fight that we'll talk about a little later on, earlier on this card, to really propel himself in those rankings. Horiguchi's lower in the rankings, but this guy was unbeatable by anybody who wasn't Mighty Mouse when he was in the UFC, left on a high, came back, got that first win in pretty dominant fashion. Might not be in that top 5 yet, but still a guy that you can throw in there and get him right in that title mix, I think no problem for a lot of people. And it was a guy who's calling out the champ right after that win, even though Pantoja was his teammate. So 2 guys there that get in the mix. But you also have a fight between Royval and Kape this weekend, who are both high in those rankings as well, and they can be in the title picture, although that might be a little bit more tough to swallow, given that Royval has a loss against Van. So I don't know if you throw him right in there off a 1 win in a title picture shot right away, but there are some interesting options. Of course, all that said, if Pantoja cannot come right back after that injury heals a little bit, you give him a little time, he's good to go, you get him back in there. It's not like Merab where maybe he just completely gassed himself out doing all these weight drops and you need to give him time to have his body recover. He just had a freak injury, and we'll see how long that takes to heal. I'm sure he's raring to go. Speaking of Tatsuro Taira, he had a great win over Brandon Moreno at flyweight right before that title fight. Moreno, of course, the 31-year-old from Mexico, was the former flyweight champion, coming off back-to-back wins against Taira, the 25-year-old from Japan, was 7-1 in the UFC, coming in with a lot of hype. Another young guy here. It would be awesome to see the young guy matchup because Taira got the win. We liked him at 130 on the money line. We thought it'd be by points at plus 155 that he got the win. He gets the second round TKO 2 minutes and 24 seconds into the round. That's right. Brandon Moreno had never been finished in a fight, and Taira is the one who come in there and do it. This is a guy who fought Figueiredo 3 times and didn't get finished. But Taira is the one who takes him out first with the second round TKO in that fight. He took the fight to Moreno right away. He's beat him up on the feet. He even looked like he might have caught him and shook him a little bit in the second. Then he gets a takedown there, and some people thought maybe Moreno kind of was out and had to wake up as he got taken down because his face looks really weird when you see the picture of him first on the mat after the takedown. Doesn't look like he's all there. So he might have gotten rocked, then gets taken down. Eventually, Taira gets the body lock on him, gets from behind, and just starts beating him up from behind, throwing those punches, even flattens Moreno out with the body lock and just starts pounding on him. And the ref jumps in there and ends the fight. Some people have claimed maybe it was a too early stoppage. I don't think so at all. I mean, this guy was getting some great punches from behind. He had the body lock. Moreno wasn't really blocking those last couple when they're just coming rain down from behind. I think it was a good job by the ref to step in there and make sure he was safe and keeping Moreno from taking too much more damage, and a good win by Taira there to propel himself into this title picture. Like I said, if Pantoja can't go right away, or not even right away, but in the first couple months of next year, and I'm sure Van wants to get right back in there because he did all that camp for 26 seconds. I'm sure that guy's ready to go. If you can get Taira in there against Van, if Pantoja's not ready, I'm all for that. I think that's the next best matchup. If Pantoja needs months to heal up because there is other damage to that elbow that we don't know about yet, Taira should be probably the next one in line against Van as the new champion. There's even talk about them having a card in Japan in the first quarter of next year, which would be a perfect place to have Taira trying for the title. Of course, that puts the champion at disadvantage, but still, that would be awesome. It would get the crowd pumped. It would draw huge numbers. I think that'd be a great title fight to make if we do not get Pantoja right away in a rematch. For that, at Bantamweight, you had a legend go out in Henry Cejudo going against Peyton Talbot. We knew this was probably going to be Cejudo's last fight. He was talking about that, pretty much said the only fight he might come back for is Moreno because he didn't like him for whatever reason still, but we knew that's probably not happening going against Talbot, the 27-year-old who was 4-1 in the UFC, who had trained with Cejudo before they had a relationship, but he was going to have a huge height and reach advantage. But we didn't step in there and say we're going to bet him a minus 290 because for me, it was it a fight that giving Cejudo a win on the way out, or was it a fight building Talbot by beating a legend? Didn't know what the UFC was looking for in that one. But with that reach advantage, we knew he was going to have a big help in striking. What we didn't know was that he was going to have a big gap in wrestling too, because he got more takedowns than Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo, the Olympic wrestler, the former double champ, got tossed around by Talbot, who beat him by unanimous decision 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards. I mean, Talbot doubled Cejudo's output on striking, which isn't that surprising. The guy had a 6-inch height, 6.5-inch reach. Good striker. You figure that going against a wrestler like Cejudo, he might outstrike him. What we didn't account for was that he was going to out-wrestle him. Talbot gets in there and gets 2 takedowns in the first round alone against an Olympic wrestler, against a guy who just dominated on the ground. That was his game. Even on one of them, stuck the tongue out as he's on top, like Cejudo would do when he was champion back in the day. So took a trick that he learned from Cejudo's bag, training with him, worked with him years ago, and threw it right back at him as he got the takedown. He had 3 takedowns to Cejudo's 1. He completely outstruck him. He dominated that fight, as the scorecards say. And a great win by him to build up his lore now as he tries to become a champion himself one day, beating the former double champion and Olympic wrestler in Henry Cejudo. And class move by Cejudo after the fight. Of course, not talking about the begging for $50,000 from Dana that he did. I don't know what that was about. The guy has fought forever, has a big podcast, but still is asking for that $50,000 that, you know, the guys who are lower on the card need just to feed their families. So he's begging for that. That wasn't the class move. That was a weird thing for me. The class move was after the fight when he's talking to Dana White, telling him how much Talbot means to him and take care of this kid. And, you know, he's going to do great things, and just really talking up his opponent, the guy who just kicked his ass for 3 rounds, and giving him a lot of credit as he's walking out the gate here for his final fight in the UFC. So good on him to kind of pass the torch to Talbot and the next generation here in the UFC as he officially fully retires for the second time in the UFC and probably the last. To open up the main card, you had a light heavyweight battle between Jan Blachowicz versus Bogdan Guskov. Now, this was one that we thought might be a possible retirement fight for a guy in Blachowicz, because even though he hadn't talked about it, at 42, the Polish former champion of this division was 1-3-1 in the last 4 years, had double shoulder surgery a couple of years ago, was just on a slide, not looking like himself, going against Guskov, the 33-year-old who had won his last 4 fights. I thought Guskov was going to win the fight at plus money. He does not. We push on that one because it's a majority draw, 28-28 on 2 cards, 29-28 for Blachowicz on one of them. Very odd situation because 3-round fight. How do you get a draw? How is it the same score? We had a 10-8 round and one where I don't know if you really should give that. This isn't boxing where a knockdown automatically gets a 10-8. This is MMA. And it usually takes a lot to get a 10-8 round. Well, that's what happened in the second round. If you look at the scoring, the judges had it on all 3 cards for Blachowicz on the first. Second round, 2 of them gave a 10-8 round to Guskov. And then the third round goes to Blachowicz. So that's how we get the draw, because there was that one 10-8 round stuck right in the middle on 2 of those judges' cards. First round was close. Both guys were landing almost exactly the same number of strikes. There's a back and forth battle, but they all gave that to Blachowicz. Second round, Guskov gets the knockdown and then tripled him in strikes. So he knocks him to the ground and then starts pounding on him for the most of the round. I guess you can give it 10-8, but you know what? It usually takes a lot to get a 10-8 round in MMA. It has to be complete domination. I'm not sure if we got all the way there, but 2 of the refs did, and they give that to Guskov. And then the third round, Blachowicz recovers. He gets a knockdown himself. He doubles up on Guskov in strikes numbers. So all that depends on how you score that middle round. If it's Blachowicz getting 1 and 3 and just a regular 10-9 round for Guskov in the middle, then we have a Blachowicz win for the first time in a couple of years. We don't get that. Instead, we get a majority draw. Very interesting scoring there. We'll have to see how some people feel about that as it goes on. We also highlighted some fights on the prelim cards that we thought would be of interest and of note. One of those was, of course, the last one on that card between Manuel Torres and Grant Dawson at lightweight. Now, Torres is the 30-year-old striker, 4-1 in the UFC. Very exciting fighter. Can be the flashy knockout type of guy. Dawson more the smother you and frustrate you type, the 31-year-old. 11-1-1 in the UFC on a 3-fight win streak. I was rolling with Dawson, minus 235. I thought he'd win by points at plus 450. Thought that he'd do the kind of wet blanket, get Torres to the ground, smother him, keep him from getting those big strikes if he could. He could not. As Torres gets the first round TKO 2 minutes and 25 seconds into the fight. Early on, they're both on the feet trying to strike. Dawson looking a little weird and awkward with some of the things he was trying to throw there. Looked like he was trying to throw, but also protect and avoid at the same time, kind of turning his head. But then later does go for the takedown that I thought he'd try to get. Doesn't. Whether he was too far away, he never really got to close that gap, so couldn't get his hands on Torres. And that leads to later on Torres putting his hands on Dawson, where he starts a little bit of a flurry and then catches him in the middle of that with a left uppercut that drops Dawson. Torres jumps right on him, throws a couple of hammer fists, throws him, some shots from the top before the ref gets in there and stops it. Good stoppage. Dawson wasn't defending himself. He was just putting the hands up and covering up, not doing anything offensively. So a good win by Manuel Torres. That's 2 wins in a row for him now. But despite that, doesn't move up in the rankings at all. Doesn't get into that top 10 because it is so loaded in that division right now and it's such a logjam with all these guys fighting each other. So right now he stays where he is, just outside that top 10. We'll see if maybe he can get a battle against someone a little bit closer to the top and try to put his name sneakily up in that top 10 with a third win in the coming months. We also highlighted the women's flyweight battle between Macy Barber and Karine Silva on that prelim card. Silva, the 32-year-old, 5-1 in the UFC, coming in from Brazil. Of course, Barber coming in after a long layoff, almost a year and a half, had some injuries and had that weird situation where she had some seizures and had to pull out just before the fight that she's supposed to have against Erin Blanchfield earlier this year. So making her return, still on a 6-fight win streak. Despite that, we liked her at minus 192. Weren't so sure because obviously we didn't know what was going on with her health-wise. We thought either way it was going to go the distance with these two. Odds weren't so great on those. Those were minus 200 at least on all 3 ways, whether it's by points or to go the distance or over the 2.5 rounds. So if you wanted to throw it in a parlay, you could have. It wasn't great to play by itself, but they all hit. Especially if you took the chance and went Barber by decision, that was only minus 110, and that would have been a nice payout because she does get that with the unanimous decision, 30-27 on 1 judge's scorecard, 29-28 on 2 judges' scorecards. Silva actually got a few takedowns in this fight, especially early on. she took it to Barber, got her to the mat in the first round, actually got a body lock, got the back, was never able to finish it there as Barber fights it off, eventually turns it back into her, does some damage. Then in the second round, again, Silva goes to the mat, but Barber is able to turn it, get the position, and was doing some damage. And then kind of she's pushing away a little bit or gets pushed off by Silva. Silva throws another up kick on Barber, who's still got her knee down, catches her right in the jaw. The ref stops it and then kind of almost shames Barber. He's telling her, oh, it was a glancing blow, like, don't ham it up. Warns Silva, but still kind of telling Barber, like, suck it up, Buttercup, let's get in there. Not his place at all to do that. You know, if her corner wants to tell her that, that's one thing, and was completely wrong because it wasn't a glancing blow. You see the replay, it landed right on her chin, and then she gets up and she's kind of stumbling around. She's unsteady. So it obviously rocked her for this guy to actually tell her, like, that it wasn't that bad and you got to get ready to fight. And she tells him, I'm dizzy. Honestly, I don't know how it wasn't stopped right there. You got an illegal kick, she's stumbling, and then tells you she's dizzy, and you don't stop the fight. Instead, you kind of push her and prod her and bully her and to keep going. But good on her. She's able to recover, recoup, and looks like, you know, she gets mad right there, gets a little Hulk in her. And you won't like her when she's mad because she dominated Silva the rest of the fight, got her to the ground, beat her up, ran through that third round. But just a terrible job by Mark Smith there. Not only missing that it was a full-on shot to the jaw. I mean, in the heat of battle and the quick reactions, okay, maybe you don't see exactly how it lands, but to then shame her for her reaction to it, acting like she's playing it up and just trying to, you know, get out of it, that's just ridiculous. That's not your place to do, dude. Bad job by him. Good job by her getting the win now, as she continues to show that she is still a force right now in this flyweight division. Well, we may be done with pay-per-views for good and with number of events for 2025, but we are not done with UFC action this year, as we have one last card on the ESPN deal, and that is this weekend. Another UFC Fight Night out there at the Apex in Vegas, 10 o'clock Eastern on Saturday on ESPN+. It is Brandon Royval versus Manel Kape, UFC Vegas 112. Now, this main event is big for this division, as we said, with the way things shook out last weekend with Van getting that title. We'll have to see how Pantoja recovers, with Taira staking his claim as one of the tops in this division and getting in the title picture. This could be big now for these guys. Number 3 in Brandon Royval, number 6 is Manel Kape, to see who can stamp their name as guys who could be in the flyweight title picture as well if we do not get Pantoja coming right back. Now, Royval, the 33-year-old from the U.S., 17-8 in MMA, 7-4 in his UFC career. Most of his wins are by submission, 2-2 in his last 4 fights, all going the distance to decision. Going against Kape, the 32-year-old from Angola, 21-7 in his MMA career, 6-3 in the UFC. Most of his wins by KO, TKO. So which style is going to control this fight? Is it the guy in Royval who wants to get it to the ground and smother you, maybe choke you out? Is it the guy in Kape who just wants to drop you before you even get to the mat? That's to be seen. Now, the books obviously favor the newer face in Kape. He is minus 310 favorite to win this fight. And maybe he's exciting, maybe he's flashy, maybe he gets the knockouts like you want to see, but when you look at Royval's record, like I said, 2-2 in the last 4, but those 2 losses are to Pantoja and Van, the champion and the former champion. Is he a guy that's ready to be a gatekeeper and just move aside for the next title challenger to come through? I don't think so. You're going to give me plus money with him? I'm going to take a chance at plus 215. If it was a situation where maybe it was an even fight or slight favorite for Kape, maybe I don't necessarily roll with that. Maybe I take a shot at the striker, but Royval has been in this division and at the top of this division for a long, long time. The guy knows what he's doing, and he knows how to smother a guy like Kape if he gets the chance. So as long as he doesn't get a flash knockout, I'm rolling with him to get the upside victory at plus 215. Now, you can get even better odds if you want to place a couple shekels here on how he's going to win the fight, whether it's by points at plus 550 or by submission at plus 750. I would not be opposed to sprinkling some money on either of those just to see if you can hit one of those and get a big payout. But my main bet, how I'm going to play this straight up, is Royval to win at plus 215. Then at featherweight, you have a battle between number 15, Gija Chikadze versus Kevin Vallejos. Vallejos, a 24-year-old from Argentina, 16-1 in MMA, 2-0 in the UFC, 11 of his wins for his career by KO TKO. Another big striker here. Against Chikadze, the 37-year-old from Russia, 38-12 in MMA, has had a long career in the UFC as well, where he is 8-3. but he's lost his last 2 and 3 of his last 4. Most of his wins for his career by KO TKO, but his last 4 fights have all gone to decision. So maybe not having that same pop that he used to, but now going against a striker who does in Vallejos, minus 320. Another big favorite here on the book is Vallejos. This time I'm rolling with the big favorite. Chikadze is a little long in the tooth and has shown that maybe his best time is up, but I'm not going to bet minus 320 straight up. So there, you got to find what is the better way to bet this. Is it just betting that he gets knocked out, that the youngster gets the victory by KO TKO as he has before? Maybe, but that's not the way I'm going to play it. The way I'm going to look at it, the better way to play it for me is the total rounds. Because I set it at 2.5. Obviously, it's a 3-round fight, so 2.5 means you're pretty much going all the way when the over, like it is, juiced to minus 152. We're going to take a chance at the under, plus 120. When you get plus money and only give up 2.5 minutes of the fight against 2 guys who have both a lot of KO TKO wins for their career, I'll take that chance. Plus money, only giving up a little portion of the fight with 2 guys who like to get knockouts. I'm going to roll that way. Under 2.5 rounds at plus 120 in this fight. Then just 2 more fights I'm going to highlight on this card. One I'll bet on, one I'm just excited to watch. The one I'm going to bet on is, guess what? We have a women's fight buried on the card that has ranked fighters, as we have seen over and over again at these UFC Vegas cards. Women's strawweight battle between number 5, Amanda Lemos versus number 10, Jillian Robertson. Robertson called for this fight after her win in May, that she was looking to retire more fighters. Well, now she gets her shot, as her original opponent was not able to come through and be part of this matchup. So now Lemos jumps in there. The 38-year-old from Brazil, 15-5-1 in the MMA, 13-6 in the UFC, coming off a loss and is 4-4 in her last 8 fights over the last 3.5 years. Going against Robertson, the 30-year-old Canadian, who's 16-8 in her MMA career, 13-6 in the UFC, but has won her last 4 fights and 6 of her last 7 fights over the last 3.5 years. So one's on her way up, the other on her way down. How do you think this one's going to play out? Well, Robertson is the favorite, minus 205. So not the worst odds. We've seen what it's like against maybe more, closely aligned, closely matched fighters, that Robertson is not a 300 or above favorite like we've seen in some of these other fights we talked about. Minus 205 is kind of respectable for the way these two are matching up. Not the worst bet to make, especially if you throw in a parlay, but looking for the value. Robertson by submission is plus 220. Robertson by points is plus 280. I'm going to go with the points. I'm going to give respect to the crafty veteran, even though she's on the way down and losing a lot. I'm going to think that she's able to keep Robertson from submitting her, and I think she goes the distance in this 3-round fight, and Robertson wins a plus 280 by points. Then we also have a welterweight battle that I'm going to be watching but not betting on just yet, between Neil Magny and Yaroslav Amosov. Magny, the 38-year-old from the U.S., we just saw out there in Australia last time against Jake Matthews, where the ref thought he was unconscious and stopped the fight just before the end of the first round. He protested and they restarted the fight, even though the ref stopped it. Very weird situation there. They continue, and eventually he gets the submission in the 3rd round over Matthews, who then appealed the decision, and it was not overturned. So he still gets the win here. Now going against Amosov, the 32-year-old from Ukraine, the former champion in Bellator. This is a guy who has got a win over Logan Storley, who's been, a badass over there in Bellator before they merged with the PFL. Now we'll see what he can do in the UFC. It's been a little bit up and down for him as far as action goes recently, because last lost the title to Jason Jackson, his last Bellator fight in 2023. Fought this March now in Cage Fury FC, now in the UFC. Now, if all things were equal and we've seen these guys fight regularly, in both instances, I'd probably roll with Amosov, even though Magny's going to have the reach advantage because he was a dominant fighter over there in Bellator, a legit badass, and probably a little bit better than Neil Magny. But we don't know where he stands right now in his career. As I said, he is from Ukraine. So we've had some big gaps here over the last couple of years due to ongoing things happening in his home country. He was out between June of 2021 and February of 2023 when he was the champion of Bellator because he was fighting in the war against Russia. There's even video of him going out and going back to his house, which had been bombed out, to go recover his Bellator title belt as he's serving in the Ukrainian armed forces. Then he came back, fought in 2023, and like we said, it did not go well in the fight against Jason Jackson. Probably had a lot on his mind. Obviously, so much going on. How can you focus and train and be all in on that fight when you had a much bigger fight for your life and for your family and for your country back home? Took some time off then and had been out between November 23 and March of 25. So now we've seen him back in MMA, training, fighting again, but who knows if he is all the way back to what he was years ago. We'll have to see that as he now prepares to do battle in the UFC for the first time. But there's a guy I'm going to keep my eye on who could definitely make waves in this division if he is at his peak performance like we saw years ago. All right, the UFC isn't the only one in action this weekend in MMA. We also have a card for the PFL again, this time happening in Lyon, France, the Champions Series for the PFL, with an early start time on Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, because, of course, being over there in France, time difference over there in Europe, they're going to be starting a little bit earlier here in the U.S. It's going to be on ESPN Unlimited, so you can stream it. Not going to be on any of the linear channels there. Make sure you can check it out if you have that. It's going to also feature the finals for 2 divisions of the PFL Europe tournaments that they had this past year. But it's going to be headlined by 2 title fights, and that's what we're going to focus on, because there's going to be a heavyweight title as the main event between Renan Ferreira and Vadim Nemkov. Ferreira, of course, a 36-year-old from Brazil, former PFL heavyweight champion, 13-4 in MMA, 11 wins by KO, TKO. Last time we saw him was last October, where he got steamrolled by Francis Ngannou for that super fights, whatever title that they made up for that event. So lost his last fight, been pretty good in the PFL overall, but now going against Vadim Nemkov, the 33-year-old from Russia, the Fedor Emelianenko protege, who is the former Bellator light heavyweight champion, 18-2 in MMA for his career, 9 wins by KO, TKO, hasn't lost a fight since he joined Bellator over 8 years ago, and is 13-0 with 1 no contest over the last 9+ years of his MMA career. Now has moved up to heavyweight, started that journey earlier this year where he fought Tim Johnson in January, took him to the ground, beat him up. This is going to be a different battle for him because Johnson was tall. So is Ferreira, 8 inches of height and 9 inches of reach advantage on Nemkov. So again, fighting a taller fighter, bigger than he even fought in January, but I'm not expecting that to be a problem for Nemkov. I think the Russian is going to get the win here. The book obviously does as well. -500 favorite. Ferreira is +340. I know he had a nice run here, but I think Nemkov is going to do similar things to what we saw Francis Ngannou do. Maybe not as easily because he's not as big as Ngannou, but I think he is going to take him down, beat him up, avoid staying at distance and taking those big strikes, and probably submit him like he did against Tim Johnson. I think it's going to be a similar type of replay, maybe with a little bit more offense from Ferreira than we saw from Tim Johnson. So we're going to have to wait on some of those odds to see what they are on how it ends or total rounds, things like that when those come out by the book. But I'm looking probably at Nemkov by submission as the thing I want to play, or maybe the under rounds, under 2.5 if that's in there for a 5-round fight. All things that are going to be in play for me when those come out on the books for this card as we get closer to it. And I'll try to put some of that out on social media when those come out so we can tell you what we like when that goes off. Also, title on the line in women's featherweight division between Cris Cyborg, the legend, and Sarah Collins. Now, again, as we talked about with that Ferreira fight, Cyborg beat Rosa Pachenko last October on that card to win some kind of belt with all the confusion that we had going on with the PFL and Bellator merger. Now, of course, all that's going to be wiped out. You're going to have only one champion in these divisions, and Cyborg is trying to become that now, going against Collins, a 35-year-old from Australia, 6-0 in MMA, 3-0 in Bellator before moving over. Half her wins by submission, half by decision. So not someone you have to worry about striking, more of a ground battle type fighter. Against someone you do have to worry about striking in Cris Cyborg, the 4-year-old from Brazil, the legend of the sport, one of the best women to ever do it. Only reason she's probably not labeled as the best is because of her only loss in the UFC, which was to Amanda Nunes. Only one of 2 losses in her career. The first one was her very first fight as a pro fighter. The next one wasn't until she lost in the UFC to Amanda Nunes after beating a bunch of other women, including some other legends. So now she is 28-2 in her MMA career, 21 wins by KO, TKO. She's been fighting pro for over 20 years. Coming towards the end here, she says her last couple fights, not necessarily this one being the last one, but coming up soon. So she will try to win that title. Once again, holding another belt in women's combat sports. Also does a lot of boxing, pro boxing recently as well. So she has held belts in multiple disciplines in combat sports. Just almost unbeatable, unless you're the Lioness. That has been Cris Cyborg throughout her career. And that's the way I see it happening here. The only way she loses this fight is if we get some freak submission that comes out of nowhere, like we saw against Fabricio Verdum versus, Fedor Emelianenko. That's the only way I see this legend going down, like we saw the decline of Fedor start there against Fabricio Verdum. Other than that, I expect her to get this win. She's a -650 favorite, so obviously a heavy favorite. not going to sprinkle some money on Collins, even though plus 440 is a nice juicy line. When the other odds come out on how fight ends, total rounds, things like that, I'm looking for Cyborg by KO, TKO, because it's probably going to be your best odds. It might not even be plus money. It might still be minus money. It might be like a minus 150, minus 165, but still better odds than minus 650. So that's how I'd be looking to play that. You also have some finals from the PFL Europe, as I said on this, for lightweight and bantamweight, but those are buried all the way on the prelims. So they're not going to give it that much attention. Neither am I. You also have some nice fights on the main card between guys that are trying to build up in Europe to maybe make stars over here in the PFL in the US as well, in Patrick Habirora and Taylor Lapilus in their own separate fights. So those will be interesting to watch. Guys to check out, look out for, because they could be names that you're going to see making waves in the PFL in the future, but not guys I'm going to bet on. So as far as the betting angle on the PFL fights, I'm only watching those top two ones, the two main title fights, the women's featherweight and men's heavyweight. But we'll be checking out the card overall before we get into some UFC later on in the day. All right, let's change back from preview to review and look back at some of the other fights we saw last weekend as well. Big card that we talked about in boxing last weekend was down in San Antonio. You had the PBC pay-per-view on Prime Video last Saturday, headlined by that vacant WBC interim junior welterweight title fight between Lamont Roach Jr. and Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Now, Cruz, a 27-year-old from Mexico, was the WBC interim super lightweight champ, had 18 wins by KO, TKO in his career of his 28 wins, 28-3-1 for his career. Going against Roach, the 30-year-old from DC, who was 25-1-2 in his career, 10 wins by KO, coming off that majority draw against Tank Davis in March where he got jobbed. So he's coming in here against Cruz, looking to rectify that situation, and he gets a majority draw. That's right. The exact same decision that he had in his last fight for the second time this year. Can't be happy about that. We thought that Cruz would get the win here at plus 190. We were surprised that he was the underdog. He was the guy who had fought in this division before. He was the guy with the power. We thought that he would use that to frustrate Lamont Roach, maybe even get a knockdown and some knockouts at some point, but does not get that. We go the distance, get to the judges' decisions, and they give it 115-113 for Cruz, and then two of them give it 113-113 for the majority draw. Now, first of all, boxing. Enough with the even rounds. And now I know we just saw in the UFC you can get a majority draw even with odd rounds, obviously with the way scoring can be, but you're not helping yourself by having even rounds because it just lends itself more so to you guys having a bunch of fights where the rounds get split in half and you get an even fight. Do an odd number. Help yourself out a little bit. I know for years you've had 12 or 10 or 8. Make it 11. Make it 13. Do what you want. I'm not saying go all the way back to the back in the day when it was 15 rounds. That'd be insane. Maybe cut it down to 11 or 9 or something like that. But stop with the even rounds because it just sets us up for more of these. And that's what we get here, the majority draw, because on my scorecard and on the judges' scorecards, they basically split the fight. I had Roach winning rounds 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And Cruz getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 11, and 12. And not only do they both split, get 6 rounds in that regard, my card and the judges, but they both got a 10-8 rounds. So that just confused it even more. Maybe if only one of them got it, then you get a victory. And we don't have this drama. But because we have even rounds and because of the way the scoring is, and they both got a 10-8, we get the draw. And normally when you get a situation like this, like when Lamont Roach got the draw the first time against Tank Davis, I came out and said it was complete crap. Because first of all, they didn't give a knockdown when Tank Davis went to a knee. But I thought that Lamont Roach won that fight. In this case, I hate to say this, I agree with the refs. It was a draw. I just laid it out for you. 6 rounds to 6 rounds. Both get a 10-8 round. So that's just the way it is. And I hate saying that. Not that I go out of my way to disagree with the judges, but I hate agreeing with the judges, especially when it's controversial like this. I thought early on in the fight, Roach was letting Cruz come at him. And you know what? He likes that style. He likes to kind of counter a little bit, but he wasn't keeping his opponent at distance, wasn't using that jab well enough. Cruz was getting in tight into the fight in the phone booth, kind of just slugfest that he wants. I was landing some big combinations. So that's why I gave him the first couple rounds there, including that third round where he gets the knockdown. He got that left hook that sent Roach stumbling to the ropes. and he kind of regains it off there, but the ref calls it a knockdown, and deservedly so, because at one point the glove of Roach does touch the canvas. So that is a knockdown, and it is the first knockdown of Roach's career. So good job on Cruz. He gets the first knockdown against Roach, first knockdown the fight, gets a 10-8 round there. That's a 3-point swing, because honestly, I thought Roach might have been able to take that round before he got caught there. Then both guys were throwing in the pocket in the fourth. Cruz was landing some low blows, starting to get warm, starting to get in trouble for that. Roach was possibly landing more, but Cruz was throwing the bigger punches in that round. And Roach throws a couple super late punches, including one that probably should have got a point taken off of that could have changed this fight. I thought that, he was leaning into Cruz a lot in the clinches, just kind of laying on him there. And at one point was laying on him a little bit, even after the ref. You could hear the ref telling him to break it up. Before the ref gets there, he's still like laying on him, still pushing him forward, so the ref can't get there. And then as the ref even touches him, throws a little rabbit shot to the head. He got warned for it. Could have gotten a point taken away, and that would have changed the fight there. So his arguing about that he won the fight, he's lucky he didn't lose it. But still, later on, things start to get chippy in the fifth, even more so with these guys in the clinch, just grabbing all the time and laying on each other. Cruz is leading with his head a little bit. He gets warned for that. Roach throwing some late punches, so it's getting ugly there in the middle, because then in the seventh, Cruz is getting warned about hitting on the belt or just below it, not necessarily in the crotch, but on the sides there, maybe some kidney liver shots. So he gets warned, and then right after does it again and gets a point taken away from him. So there in the seventh round, you have a 10-8 round going in the favor of Roach, because he wins that round and Cruz gets a point taken away. Dumb mistake by him, because that could have changed the fight too. Then Cruz starts to slow down in the 8th and 9th round and kind of changes his style. All of a sudden, the style is flipped, and it's no longer Cruz coming forward and throwing big shots while Roach tries to box. All of a sudden, it's Cruz trying to box while Roach is throwing big shots. Very weird situation there, but that helps Roach steal a couple rounds there in the 8th and 9th. Then as we get into the later rounds, Cruz maybe was kind of slow playing and trying to rebuild himself, because in the 11th and 12th, he comes back. And big thing happens in the 11th, because I thought that Roach was going to be able to take that round. He looked like he was doing the better job, looked like he was the more active fighter. And then just before the end of the 11th, in a close round, Cruz comes alive and lands a big shot that kind of stumbles him a little bit. Then he jumps on him, lands a couple more shots. I think that swayed the judges. I think that saved the fight for Cruz in that 11th round, where he suddenly comes alive at the end, because a lot of times, what was the last thing you did? And he landed a big shot at the end, and then a nice little combo to cement it maybe in their minds that he won that round and maybe save himself a decision draw instead of a loss. Then in the 12th round, Cruz was back to coming forward, taking bigger shots, laying it on Roach. So he gets that last round, and those last 2 rounds save him, because honestly, I had a split after the 8th round, and then you get to the 9th and 10th round where Roach is the one coming forward, where he's putting the pressure on, where he's landing more shots, and I thought he was going to pull away and run away with it, because Cruz looked gassed, but then comes alive at the end of the 11th to steal that one, and has a big 12th round to salvage the draw. So even though I hate draws, I hate ties, why did we just sit there for over an hour watching a fight that nobody wins? It's frustrating as hell, but the judges got it right. In my opinion, it was a draw. Second straight time, as I said, that Roach leaves with a majority draw, but last one wasn't his fault. He did enough. This one, maybe let himself off the hook a little bit here in that 11th round, let himself get caught in order to turn the tide there again for Cruz at the end. Cruz retains the WBC Interim Junior Welterweight title because of the draw. Now, both guys are interested in a rematch, but Cruz says he will only do it if we get a different ref, because he thought he won the fight and the ref stole it from him with that point deduction. I mean, I can understand that a little bit. That's tough to swallow, but he warned you. And then right after he warned you, pretty much the next punch he threw was right the same thing they told you not to do. So that's on you. That's just stupid to do the same thing the guy just warned you about. At least hide it a little bit better if you're going to try to cheat like that. I thought it was a draw. Cruz could have won that fight if he didn't lose that point. He could have also won it if he didn't give up the middle 7, 8, 9 rounds there, where he just seems to be taking the foot off the gas and fighting a different style than he's used to. So it's easy to blame the ref. I don't think he did a terrible job, even though both guys were doing some dirty stuff. I thought Cruz was leading with the head. I thought Roach was laying on him and trying to tie him up a little too much and throwing some rabbit punches. So, yeah, the ref could have helped him. He could have not taken that point away. He also could have taken a point away from Roach. But either way, both guys were at fault. I don't blame the ref in that one. I blame them for their own actions. It was a majority draw. That's the way it should have gone. And we'll see if we get a rematch from these guys or if we get different opponents, because we thought we'd get a rematch between Tank Davis and Roach. And then Tank Davis went to go try to fight Jake Paul, and then gotten more hot water with the law. Who knows what we'll get? No guarantees in boxing that we'll see these guys again, although it would be interesting to see a rematch between the two of them. You also had a battle at middleweight title fight there between Johan Gonzalez and Erislandy Lara. Lara was supposed to fight another opponent before he got pulled fight week due to a doping violation. So we get Gonzalez last minute in there. Lara was a big favorite at minus 750. Liked him to win. We thought it'd be by KO TKO because he'd been rolling that way over the last couple fights despite being over the wrong side of 40. But instead, he gets the unanimous decision win, 118-108, 120-106, 119-107. Yeah, do that math. That means they gave him 10, 11, or 12 rounds. It was complete domination by Erislandy Lara. Even had 2 10-8 rounds, knocked down his opponent in both the first and last round of the fight. So could have gotten the finish maybe, but doesn't get that for us. Instead, goes the distance, dominates Gonzalez in this fight, and he gets the victory to retain his titles. You also had a battle between Jose Ramos Jr. and Shane Mosley Jr., where Ramos Jr. takes it by unanimous decision in that one, 117-111 on 2 cards, 116-112 on another. Ramos seemed to be controlling it early on, and then in the 4th and 5th, Mosley landed some shots that looked like he shaked his opponent, looked like he had him in trouble, but he recovers and builds up momentum in the later rounds and ends up taking the decision there to win those titles. So decent card there for the PBC to end out 2025. We'll see what is next for them coming in the new year. All right, we talked about the guys that wear the gloves. Now let's talk about the guys who do boxing without them. BKFC 85 was in action as well, Hollywood, Florida. You had a rematch to headline that one, Trout versus Palomino 2. This was part of that lightweight tournament that they had for the belt. You had the earlier fight between Franco Tenaglia and Ben Bonner, where I thought Ben Bonner got jobbed over there in Italy. Tenaglia moves on. Who would he face for that title? Well, turns out it will be Austin, no doubt, Trout, as he gets the victory in the rematch. These guys had fought before for the welterweight title that Palomino held. Trout got the victory there by decision. Palomino dropped back down to 155, where he was the champion as well. Now these guys fought there. Both thought that they'd be better at 155, and Trout gets the better of it here. He was the favorite at minus 400. He gets a TKO win after round 3 by doctor stoppage due to vision issues. Palomino was coming forward aggressive early on, trying to push the pace while Trout avoided the big shots, trying to find his distance. Started coming forward late in that first round. Palomino went down late after a punch as well, but it was ruled a slip, so I still gave that one to Palomino early on. Second one, Trout starts using the jab more against Palomino while avoiding Palomino's big shots. Palomino jumped in late to try to throw Trout to the mat in the clinch, but that's ruled a slip. So both rounds, we have guys go down. Neither ruled a knockdown. I thought Trout won that one, even going to the third. He starts sticking and moving in that last round that we had. Palomino throws a little bit to the body, but Trout landed some good jabs and uppercuts late in the round. And one of those hurt Palomino, cut him above that left eye. I thought Trout won that round. I thought he was up 2-1 at that point. But before we start the 4th round, they send Palomino to the corner to the doctor to go check out that cut. And it doesn't look like he can even open that eyelid. It looks like it is completely swollen. It looks like he's got one eye left. When they do the vision check, everything that was close, he could tell everything that they moved back, where you need that depth, where you need both eyes. Could not get it right. Doctor says that is it. He cannot see. Fight is over. He was not happy about it. He was throwing a tantrum after it, of course, because he wants to keep fighting. He is a warrior. He's going to try to fight until he can't see. But the doctor went in there, protected him, did the right thing, ended the fight. Trout says it's a shame the fight ended that way because he felt that they're both starting to heat up and that the last 2 rounds were going to be awesome between them. But that is the way it ends. And now Trout gets the victory and moves on to fight Franco Tenaglia, who he says is going to be easier than Palomino. He said that Palomino was the better fighter. He thought this was his finals. So now he's going to go against Tenaglia and think that he can get the easy finish against a guy who's dangerous, has some big finishing power. We'll see if he can do that. Then before that fight, you also had a title on the line in the Bantamweight division where it was a vacant title for Justin Joyboy Ibarolla fighting Royal Ryan Reber. Reber, the 38-year-old, more of a slower starter in the BKFC. Ibarolla, he gets right in there and mixes it up. We liked Ibarolla. He gets the victory over Reber by KO in the 3rd round, 1 minute, 21 seconds into the fight. Reber was backing up right away like he always does, with Ibarolla chasing, trying to get his hands on him in the 1st round. Not a lot from either on the first. I thought Ibarolla on the activity and the coming forward gets that round. Ibarolla tried to throw more right away in the 2nd round, going for the body. Reber was starting to find his range, though. It looked like he was getting better. I thought he could have stolen that round 10-9 with some solid shots, solid jab work. Then to start the 3rd round, Ibarolla comes out even more aggressive than he even did in the 2nd round, attacking that body right away, trying to cut down Reber. Then 27 seconds in, drops him with a left hook to the head, keeps chasing him after he gets back up, eventually lands a powerful straight right to the eye of Reber, who goes down to a knee and doesn't get back up before the count. Just right into the orbital there. We'll see if he had some injuries, some breakage, something like that, because he doesn't even try to get back up after that one punch. And now Ibarolla takes the vacant Bantamweight title. Afterwards, Ibarolla was trashing a lot of people in the arena who were saying how good they were, that they're better than him. Especially pointed out Kai Stewart had some nasty words for him. Looking forward to maybe fighting him if he comes up to fight for that title. But right now, telling people not to underestimate him. Talks about how good a chin he has. He showed that against Reber. He's shown it before and still remains unbeaten in the BKFC now at 9-0 and with the title around his waist. At heavyweight, interesting fight before that with Leonardo El Zombo Perdomo versus Corey Willis. I mean, why have we not given Perdomo a title fight before this? I don't know. The guy was 9-0 coming in, just unbeatable, and was a minus almost 5,000 favorite. He gets the win against Corey Willis. But guess what? He goes all the way to the third round. That's the first time we've seen this guy out of the first. He has just destroyed everybody in the first 2 minutes of their fights. Now it goes all the way to the third, where he gets a KO 1 minute and 33 seconds into that third round. Now, early in that fight, Willis came out aggressive, tried to bring it to Perdomo, tried to put him on the back foot, change up what Perdomo does, where he usually likes to come in there like a bull right at you, but ends up going down early in the round. Rule the slip, so it doesn't count. Then, 25 seconds in, Perdomo gets the first knockdown, where Willis coming forward, has his hands up, head down aggressively, but Perdomo catches him, drops him. Even takes Perdomo down late in the round, still trying to fight, still trying to keep going, but it's ruled a slip there as they get tied up. 10-8 Perdomo in the first round. Willis was trying to tie Perdomo up in the clinch a lot in the second, trying to avoid those big shots, but eventually gets dropped again with the stiff jab 1 minute in. So another 10-8 round for Perdomo going into the third round, up 4 points already. Then with just over 30 seconds left in that third round, Perdomo catches Willis with a nasty uppercut that drops him on his face. Doesn't even try to get back up. Ref doesn't even try to finish the count. Obviously not going to continue this fight. The third knockdown in 3 rounds puts him face first on the mat, and that is the end. El Zombo Perdomo wins once again. Now 10-0 in the UFC. There should not be another fight this guy gets that doesn't involve the title on the line. Why are we not making him versus Ben Rothwell yet? It is insane. Get this guy a title shot already. El Zombo Perdomo versus Big Ben Rothwell. Oh, that's going to be an awesome fight. Not going to be a long fight, but it's going to be awesome. Someone's getting knocked out. We got to see that happening. You also had a women's flyweight battle before that with Christine Vicens versus Karina Dam. Dam making her BKFC debut, the 46-year-old longtime MMA fighter, going against Vicens, the 40-year-old from Florida. 4-1 the BKFC. Her only loss, of course, coming against Christine Faria in the title. She gets another victory, was a heavy favorite. First round, TKO, 1 minute and 9 seconds into the fight. Dam came out strong. Another fighter like Willis coming out, trying to put their opponent on the back foot, trying to bully Vicens, but Vicens caught her with a big right 30 seconds in. They both threw in close range there. Vicens was getting the better of it. But later in the round, Vicens turns it around. She starts becoming forward and the aggressor again, like she likes to do. And with about 30 seconds left in the round, a huge right that shakes Dam, throws a few punches, but goes down after that onto her back. The ref waves it off almost immediately. Kind of a delayed reaction to the big punch of Vicens, but Dam goes down on her back, and that is it. After the fight, Vicens says that she still thinks she could be the champion, that is still her goal before her career is finished, that if she gets another shot against the Misfit, that she can beat her. Obviously, Faria being in the crowd with her title, not agreeing at all, but we will see if we ever get that rematch. Both these women have gone through that division. Does the Misfit fight at 125 again when she just defended things in Newark? She said that she felt good at 135, that was more her natural weight. So who knows if she goes back to that division and fights Vicens again or stays up at the heavier weight class and fighting for a 135-pound title or just defending the Queen of Violence belt. Also at welterweight, Gogo Sylvesky versus Javar Fort Knox. Gogo gets the win, first round TKO, 1 minute and 34 seconds into that fight. This one was just a Gogo domination from the start. He got him right away attacking, going against Fort, backing him up. Now, Fort was throwing some big shots as well, but they were not landing like Sylvesky's was. Gets him with big hooks with both hands, drops him over 30 seconds into the fight. Then dropped him again 1 minute into the fight, and then again 20 seconds later. But even though third time is the charm usually, this time it was fourth because Fort gets back up to his feet. But then with 30 seconds left, Fort got his back against the rope. Sylvesky unloading on him, kind of threw him against the ropes there, pushed him there, and just started throwing on him. Drops him for a fourth time, and this time the ref jumps right in, ends the fight there. Also, a great performance at cruiserweight for Stephen Tomahawk Townsend against Julio Perez Rodriguez. I thought this one would be a banger, and it certainly was. Townsend gets the second round TKO 39 seconds into that fight. He was coming forward and dropped Perez with a quick 1-2, 10 seconds into the fight. Keeps stalking, looking for that finish. And because of that, Perez led some big shots on Townsend as he's coming forward and knocks him down with 50 seconds left in the round. Townsend gets back up again, throwing more shots, drops Perez for a second time before the end of the round. So it is a back and forth first round. Both guys getting hit to the mat, both guys getting up and throwing big. But we go to a second round where Townsend's coming forward, throwing big again to start that round against Perez. Eventually gets to the point that Perez's head is just snapping back with every punch Townsend throws. And because of that, the ref jumps in there, stops the fight, and gives the victory to Tomahawk Townsend, who, after the fight, took shot at the Mohawk. Decided to call out Esteban Rodriguez. Of course, we've seen on this show saying that if he calls you out, it's not because he picks on little guys. He's never been a bully. He's always wanted to fight the best. And one of those guys right now in that division that's in his way is Esteban Rodriguez, and he wants a shot at him. Esteban seems all game for that. He was even asking him questions at the press conference about fighting him. So both these guys have a lot of respect for each other, but both want to put hands to the other man's face and climb up those rankings in cruiserweight. Last one we'll highlight before we move on here was a fight at lightweight between Howard H.C. Davis and Ramiro Figueroa. Figueroa, an up-and-comer in this division, going against Howard Davis, who's been at the top of lightweight and featherweight divisions his whole career in the BKFC, had a title shot against Kai Stewart that he was unable to deliver on, and he's unable to deliver in this fight as the fight gets stopped after the second round by a TKO doctor's stoppage because of a cut on Davis's eyelid. Early on, both guys were kind of looking for their spots, moving around. Figueroa was moving on the outside, trying to nail H.G. Davis from there. Davis was looking for big punches with every punch. I thought Figueroa was a little better, landed a little more. He got that first round. Second round, Figueroa continues to land from the outside, moving while Davis is looking for those big shots. Same replay of that first round. This time, Figueroa lands a nice shot towards the end of the round that starts bleeding over the right eye of H.G. Davis. So I have him up 2-0 going into that third round. Before we get there, they stop it, send him to the corner, have him checked out by the doctor, and the doctor almost immediately stops the fight despite Davis's protest. Wasn't as swollen and ugly as Palomino's eye, but had a nasty cut on the top of that eyelid. And pretty much right away, if there is a cut on that eyelid, the doctor is going to stop that fight. There is no fixing it if you ruin that eyelid. So they are not going to take a chance. And they end the fight. And by ending that, also end Davis's career, because he came out the next day and retired from combat sports, even though still a young man, says that now it is time to move on and focus on a different chapter of his life for his family, and that he's definitely done with the BKFC and probably done with combat sports in general. But thank you for all the fights you put on, H.G. Davis. Great battles in the BKFC that you have put on for us, and we look forward to seeing what is next in your lifetime. All right, this was a loaded episode here for Fighting Lions with Brian Ciano. There was so much to talk about with fights we saw, fights we had coming up. I mean, I even skipped over that BKFC card this weekend over there in the UK. They have a battle including for the light heavyweight title of the UK between Holmes and Cook. That one's going to be a banger. Don't sleep on that. Both those guys end their fights by KO, TKO, one way or another. So that one is not going to go in the judges' hands. But before we get out of here, there are a bunch of fights announced for the beginning of 2026 in all of combat sports that we have to touch on and let you know are happening, because there are going to be some real bangers that we are going to get to watch in the first quarter of the new year. Let's start off with the UFC, where it was announced that the Fight Night on February 21st in Houston will be headlined by a middleweight battle between number 3, Sean Strickland, and number 4, Fluffy Hernandez. Now, we haven't seen Strickland since he lost to DDP for the second time back in February in Australia, trying to grab that title. 29-7 for his career. Some great wins over guys like Adesanya and Costa. But he's been on suspension since the middle of the summer because was at a tough enough event supporting a teammate in the corner. And when his teammate lost, the opponent decided to give a crotch chop to everybody in the corner, which started a big altercation. And Sean Strickland, of course, not one to get out of a fight, decided to get involved. That cost him for a suspension from the Nevada State Athletic Commission, which is ending this year, the end of this year. So we will see him early in 2026 now in that fight against Hernandez, who was 9-2 in the UFC on an 8-fight win streak, coming off a win over Roman Dolidze. Of course, loves the submission victory. So we'll see if Strickland can keep it on the feet and pick him apart, or if Fluffy gets it to the ground and is able to get the submission. Should be a great fight. down in H-Town there in February. Also, UFC announcing the headliner for UFC 326, fight that was rumored to be part of the January card that gets pushed back a couple months to March 7th. T-Mobile in Las Vegas. It's going to be a battle between two of the top three guys in the lightweight division in Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira. I talked about both these guys last week about that interim title fight at lightweight and how both these guys are ranked higher than, of course, Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje, but probably weren't guys you want to throw in there right now because of their recent records. Well, I love that we were putting them together, battling it out here for a possible top contender spot later in the year. Max Holloway, of course, 6-4 in the last 6 years, but all four of those losses are in title fights to Volkanovski for 3 and 1 to Poirier. So everybody else this guy beats coming off a win over Poirier to defend that BMF title that, of course, he won by beating Gaethje last April. So he beats most of the best. There's just certain guys that have his number, like Volkanovski. Otherwise, Max Holloway, blessed, one of the most exciting fighters that we've seen in the UFC in the last 20 years. Going against a guy in Charles Oliveira, who is the former lightweight champion. Of course, fell in some hard times there, up and down over the last couple of years there. Beat Gaethje, lost to Makhachev. Beat Dariush, lost to Sarukian. Beat Chandler, lost to Topuria. Now coming off that win over Gamrot down there in Brazil in October, where he made quick work of his late replacement opponent. It's going to be an awesome, interesting fight between these two guys. Could go so many different ways as we get Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira, Blessed versus Do Bronx. Then in boxing, we have a great fight to finish out January 31st. We found out the fight, and now we have found out the venue. At Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, Ring is going to put on a card that will be headlined by Teofimo Lopez and Shakur Stevenson at 140 pounds. Now, no better place to put a fight between a guy from Brooklyn and a guy from Jersey than at Madison Square Garden. That's going to be an awesome battle between two champions there. Lopez's WBO and Ring welterweight titles will be on the line here. Stevenson is going to be fighting at this division for the first time, looking to add a fourth weight class title to his repertoire. We'll see how that goes. Of course, Lopez, 21-1 with 13 KOs. Stevenson, 24-0 with 11 KOs. Should be an awesome fight at the Mecca at the end of January. Then BKFC announced a welterweight title fight in the middle of January 17th, in Mohegan Sun. You're going to have Julian Lane defending his welterweight title against Dustin Pegg. Pegg, of course, a longtime UFC fighter. You know him for years, watching him in MMA, being on the Tough series. Has had a nice run here in the BKFC, 4-2 in his career. One of those was a DQ early on because, of course, transitioning from MMA, didn't know the rules well enough to not hit a grounded opponent. Other than that, only losses is Carlos Trinidad Snake, coming off back-to-back TKO wins, going against Let Me Bang Lane, who's had a career resurgence here. A guy who was practically left for dead, who was on a long losing streak, now took some time off, regrouped, changed how he has fought, and has been a force ever since. Won that belt in a battle in the summer of 2025, now holds on to it and defended the first time against Dustin Pegg. Should be a banger between those two for sure in January. Last thing before we get out of here and close out this episode to talk about is not a fight announcement, but a fighter announcement coming from the PFL. And that is that they've re-signed Johnny Eblen. Of course, the former middleweight champion, 16-1 in his career, coming off that first career loss, of course, to Van Steenis, where he got caught late, was dominating that fight, then got caught late for the submission loss. Now going in there, back to the PFL, staying with it. This is a smart move for the PFL. This is a guy that if they had let him go, that had let him get to free agency and hearing a bunch of other offers, might have been in high demand for some of these organizations, even like the UFC, who's stolen a lot of fighters from Bellator or the PFL lately. They bring him back, and this could possibly set up that rematch. I want that rematch. How can we not see that? He was winning that fight. He had 4 rounds in his back pocket before Van Steenis steals it in the final closing minutes here. So you got to see that rematch. Good job by them to bring it back. I think that'll bring a lot of hype and a lot of attention to them. If they get that rematch put together, that'd be an awesome fight to see. Good for the PFL to bring back Johnny Eblen. They also announced a couple weeks ago that they re-signed AJ McKee as well. So another guy who is at the top of his game, was one of the best fighters in that organization. And it was very smart for them to keep under their umbrella because it was probably in high demand for many other places. So good job by the PFL bringing back some of their best of the last month or so, bringing back AJ McKee and Johnny Eblen. That's going to close things out here for another episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Make sure you follow us, as we said, on social media, Fighting Lines on X, Fighting Lines Pod on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. And wherever you're partaking of the show, whether it is YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, comment. Just help us get out there in the ether and for people to find us and get involved with the show just like you do. When we come back next week, it's going to be a big show. We're going to have a fight night recap for that UFC card we talked about. We'll talk about that BKFC UK card a little bit and maybe talk about that final card coming up at the Mohegan Sun on December 20th. Some good battles there as well. We'll preview the Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua card, big boxing match on Netflix next Friday. And maybe we'll even preview some of the things coming up at the beginning of January as we get ready to probably take a couple weeks off here for the show, because you got a great card on January 3rd with some major female boxers walking into the ring, some good action to talk about and preview, all that coming up next week on Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano.